Hello, welcome back to another Ask Me Anything. I'm Lindsay Elliott from Lindsay Elliott Coaching. And this week I have a question all about health anxiety, which is a very well-timed question because I'm soon in June 2023, if you're watching this in sort of fairly real time. I'm going to be starting a 4-week coaching program with a friend and fellow change coach, Becca Gardner, all about health anxiety freedom. So I'll link to that in the comments below. But let's get going with Susan's question. So she says, "Dear Lindsay, I've struggled with feeling worried about my health for many years. It's now got to the point where I absolutely dread being ill or my kids being ill. I'm constantly checking for symptoms in myself and my kids, and it's making me miserable. I worry if I get ill, I won't be able to look after my children. I started to avoid crowded places in case I catch something. Can you help?" So I had a little bit of email exchange with Susan about this, just a few clarifying questions. And for her, this is more of a kind of question about becoming ill with something, not necessarily like terminally ill, which is of course another place that our minds love to worry, but more about kind of being really laid up in bed with something like COVID or a bad flu or terrible food poisoning, something like that. So, and really, it doesn't really matter what the mind is actually worrying about in terms of our health. The mechanism is exactly the same, and also the solution is exactly the same, but just to sort of clarify that. So if you're listening to this, and this is something that you as a parent, or just even in yourself, you just worry about becoming unwell, this is going to be super helpful for you. So the first thing that, Susan, that I want to talk about is that obviously in terms of our brains, so I talk a lot in my videos about how the brain and our mind is working to keep us safe. And it's absolute, the sole purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. And one of its jobs is to scan for danger to see if there is any kind of threat to survival. Now, obviously, our health of our body is going to look like a pretty important, if not the most important topic to our brains. And certainly if you're someone who has had a history of being concerned about your health, there's the possibility of this getting ramped up is quite common. And obviously we've also got in this mix another massive topic that in terms of like survival, if we look at in terms of children, it's like the survival of our genes. So to a brain and a mind, that also looks super important. So not only have we got the health of of Susan, of your body, but also the health of your children, all going to look super important to a brain or to a mind. So I'm just saying that to kind of like, I appreciate that you are aware that this is now sort of going beyond the bounds of what is normal. But I just want to kind of normalize that this is happening, that your brain or your mind has innocently just picked this up as something that it needs to pay loads of attention to, and just how normal that is, given that that's its function, is to keep you alive. And being unwell potentially looks like a threat to survival, okay? And it obviously also comes from a real place of love as well. So just to kind of take off, if you've got on your shoulders any kind of feelings of why am I like this, and feeling bad about it or guilty about it or frustrated about it or that you're not good enough about it, just to kind of take that off of the table so that hopefully you can hear something helpful in what I'm saying, is that it's really normal. It isn't helpful, of course, you know that, or you wouldn't have asked the question. It's really normal. It comes from a place of love, and it comes from a place of survival of your lovely brain, your amazing brain, your organ, wanting to look after you. Okay, so it's totally okay that this is happening. But what we want to see about this is that, so this is why I asked Susan a clarifying question, is that what it's picking up and talking about, so being unwell with like a flu or COVID or a cold or something, is that the mind has gone into catastrophizing about this, okay? So what it's saying about it is, in terms of all of the dread of becoming unwell, is that it's looking into the future. Okay, so first off, we want to see it's not happening now. Okay, none of this is happening now. And I know that you'll know this, Susan, but just to really kind of step back and see, none of this is happening now. Okay, this is totally a mind picking something up, becoming unwell, getting some kind of illness that means you're laid up in bed, and then it's catastrophizing about that. Okay, so number one, it's not happening. Number one, it's not happening. Number two, it's catastrophizing. And it's only catastrophizing so that it can keep your attention, because it feels that you having your attention means you're going to do something to stop yourself from becoming unwell. Okay, so we would just want to see that that is happening and that it's jumping to the worst case scenario. So not only is it jumping to, right, I'm going to get unwell, but also the worst case scenario of that is, and I'm not going to be able to look after my children. Okay, so I will talk about that little piece in a minute. But what we want to start focusing on is the fact that it's not happening now. Okay, and that your brain or your mind has now become hypervigilant for looking for symptoms, because you said, I'm looking for symptoms in myself and my children, and why that is looking like that's a helpful thing to do. So if we are working from the premise that you have some control over this, then it makes sense to be hypervigilant for symptoms. Okay, that's a given. But what I want to try and pull back into is that, what if we don't have any control over it? So if we look at certainly if we look at kind of infectious things, or even just things going wrong with the body, there's certain things that we can do that might aid that process. Okay, so for example, if we know that someone's got a cold or know that someone's got COVID, we might not choose to go and immediately hang around with them. Okay, but most of the time there isn't this direct correlation of do this and become unwell. Now, it might look like that to a brain. It might, so your brain is starting to say to you, don't go out into crowded places because you're going to catch something. Now, of course, if you are out in a crowded place, there is more chance, more probability that you might come into contact with someone and catch something. But what your brain or your mind won't be seeing is that there's loads of times when you will have been around someone and not caught it. There would have been times when you will have been in a crowded situation and caught something, and times when you won't. But because the mind, the brain, is absolutely designed to totally focus on the negative, because that's how it keeps us safe, and that's how it thinks it helps to predict the future. That it's going to bias itself towards any time where you did go out and you caught something versus all of the hundreds of times when you will have been out and not caught something. So seeing that that bias is also happening can be super helpful. And so for your brain, for like the limited kind of, and it really is, I think, with the health of the body, because obviously our brains are amazing machines. They are like beyond compare with how amazing they are. But even that said, the health of our body is still beyond its control. It's still beyond its capability, because there's so much else within the body that's at play here, you know, in terms of your immune system, you know, what your emotions are like, how much sleep you've had, what nutrition you've had, how stressed you are. And who knows what else goes on as to why sometimes we pick up a cold and sometimes we don't pick up a cold. So it's not all just down to the mind being able to control everything. And that's what we really want to see here, that the brain is trying to control something that it cannot control. And you are aware that in the process it's making you miserable, because you're changing your life and changing your behaviors because of it. So if we come from the premise that it looks like it's something that our brain, that we can control, whether we become unwell, then it makes loads of sense to be hypervigilant for symptoms, to be looking for symptoms in ourselves, to go, am I becoming a bit unwell, so that I don't, you know, and I need to prevent it from getting worse. And I need to check for symptoms in my children so that maybe I don't catch something from them. So it's all like there's sort of some sense in it somewhere. There's like a vein of truth in it, but innocently, because you've got a bit of health anxiety or health worry going on, the dial is just totally turned up on it far too loud, and it's turned up beyond point of it being helpful. So if the brain can't control it, okay, it's not down to the brain, either whether we get unwell, how much, what the severity of that illness is, and how capable we are going to be or not going to be of looking after our children. If that's something that our brain can't control and we can't control, then where can we look? Okay. And I think you've asked this question because you're aware that there maybe is somewhere else to look. So what if we can absolutely just trust that the body is going to look after itself? That if we do catch an infection, that our body is totally capable of dealing with it without our mind getting involved. There is another energy, another intelligence that is healing wounds and is digesting our food and is breathing our lungs and is beating our hearts. And that's the thing that absolutely helps us to get better when we are ill. Nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our brain, nothing to do with our thinking, nothing to do with our mind. We don't have to do anything to get better other than maybe help our body a little bit to rest, eat appropriately healthy food, and just let nature take its course. So what we want to see is that it looks as though it's a function of us, our thinking, our brain, our minds, but actually the body intelligence totally has it. The body intelligence we can totally trust to help us to feel better, to help us to heal from whatever it is that we've got going on. And then the other piece of it that I also think that we can trust. So I do understand this as a parent myself, when we look at the situation of being unwell enough to the point where you maybe can't look after your children. And if you haven't got a partner, that can look even maybe more scary or more something that you need to worry about and be hypervigilant for. But even if you have got a partner, but that partner has to go to work, or they might be away with work, or they're away on holiday or something like that. There's loads of places that our mind can start to catastrophize. And let's remember, it's not happening now, it's just jumping into the future. But what we can also, if we pull back and see how life is actually working, not how it's all just being talked about in our head, is if we pull back, we can see that in the moment, okay, so say the worst case scenario happens in your world of you get unwell with something, you are very unwell with it, you need to go to bed and rest, but you can trust that your body's just going to heal it, you're going to get better. But something needs to happen with your children. We can trust that in the moment we have an inner GPS or an inner sat-nav or an inner connection to a wisdom that is greater than us, that absolutely will give us a nudge of how to deal with this. We can't deal with it ahead of time. And this is where the constant thinking about it and the avoiding going out because in case something happens, where it starts to affect our life, and the constant kind of thinking about how would I handle that, where it's just so unhelpful because we're just spinning our wheels, stressing ourselves out and not actually getting anywhere. When what we can rely on is that we are connected to our own inner wisdom, our own inner guidance, that if that situation were to happen, we would think of something. Something would occur to us that means we're going to call this person or let this friend know or ask our older child to help out, whatever it is. Or we just find the reserves within us to do the bare minimum with the children and then rest when we can. Anyway, I don't want to go into the details of what the solution might be, but it's just, can you notice, Susan, that every single time you have been unwell, something has happened where you have been taken care of, your children have been looked after, okay? And what if we can trust that that is going to happen in the future, even if we were desperately ill in bed, something will occur to us to help us in that situation. We are so connected to this amazing guidance system that we all have within us, but we don't notice it because we're so busy listening to the chitter chatter of the mind, talking about something that isn't even happening in the here and now. and trying to plan ahead, and what would I do then, and what would I do now, and I don't know what I do. Well, you don't know what you would do because you're not in it now. But what we can guarantee is that when you're in it, a solution will present itself. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have got any further questions about it, or if anybody listening to this has got any questions or comments about this, please do leave them in the comments below. If you would like to ask me anything, then please just email me. The email's on the screen now, lindsay@lindsayelliott.co.uk, and I'd be delighted to answer your question with one of these videos. And please do all of the YouTubey things. Please do like and subscribe, like this video and subscribe to my channel, as it will help me to reach more people. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.